Green Eyes? Ready to go for a run?
Yeah, about that, I'd like to join you, but I got a case of the shin splints.
I'm not really sure what a shin splint is, but you're a big bunch of wooden splinters.
Yeah, well, I'm not really sure how that comment's helpful, but I really would like to know what's going on and how I can fix these things for good. Can you help? All right, gang, let's go ahead and tackle it right now. What are shin splints? All right, let's go over a few things here. We know that joints are supposed to do what? They're supposed to move, right? All joints do is move back and forth. They move back and forth with what? External forces applied, meaning you stand, walk, run, your foot wants to what? Collapse, okay? That's what happens when you take just a bag of bones, it just collapses. And we know that we've got parts, right? So if you want a lot of detail on this, you can read my book, Run and Rewired. I talk about the idea behind a stability continuum, right? I've got different things that work here. I've got joints that move, right? I've got a brain which pulls a trigger and tells my brain, hey, it would be nice if your muscles would wake up at a certain amount of time and pull a certain amount of force. And then muscles, right, do their job to actually create pulling, right, to actually cause joints to move, right? So this system of, this kind of classic system of mechanical stability is how we actually steer and control all these joints in our foot and ankle. So let's get to a simple concept, right? If I think about now the fact I know the joints are supposed to move, I understand that I'm supposed to have a brain to give my muscles a signal to do something, right? To turn on and control my body. I want to make sure I can actually dampen loads, right? So if I take this foot and just drop it down to the ground, it falls, all right? Now, we don't want to land that hard. So what we do is we have little people, right? You have little Legos inside your body. Not really. But if you did, right? And if these little Lego women would actually what? Slow your foot coming down to the ground, okay? It would require what? Extra work. You make these poor little people work really hard to slow your body from moving. Now, you don't have little people in your body, but you have what? You've got muscles. Okay, so we use this little band to symbolize this, right? So first thing we have to do is talk about how much load is going on these muscles, i.e. how hard these little people have to work to what? Slow your foot down on the ground and steer the rear foot on forefoot, right? That's what these little people have to do. That's what your muscles have to do. If you remember from our last video on stress fractures, we talked about the fact that load is good for the body, right? If we do nothing, our bodies get weak. If we do too much, right, we also get hurt by death by overload, right? We can't control things. So this intensity or how much intensity and volume muscles are working regulates sort of where we are. If we do not enough, right, you show up untrained, you have a lot of injuries in this capacity because we show up with a system that's not resilient and robust enough to tolerate the demands of the sport that we're doing. If you show up with too much load, this is the classic example of too much, too fast, too soon, you wind up with overload too. But we want to find out if we can stay in this healthy window of doing what? Just enough to actually push things in a beneficial window, or kind of even in maintaining, kind of switching back and forth here at various points in the season to keep our body healthy, right? So let's talk about how this plays out. All right, if you look at the foot, right, we've got sort of two things I'm going to break this down into. Shin splints are a big garbage bag term, which basically means that the system is overloaded. So let's talk about two different systems here. You have muscles up in the front of the shin, right? They anchor up on the front of the tibia, and they go down in the foot. Now, they don't go straight like this. They kind of go a little bit of angle, right? Because you have this thing called a retinaculum, which is a pulley for really soft tissues. What happens, though, is you contact the ground, and these muscles in the front are slowing the foot as it contacts down. If these muscles weren't there, your foot would go kaboom, right? So again, your little Lego people, i.e. these muscles, show up to go, let me just slow this motion of the foot coming down to the ground. So how do you get overload of this muscle and its long insertion point up the front of the shin? Well, let's talk about this, right? So again, I drew this out. It doesn't mean green's good and red's bad. I just picked two different colors, right? So if this is kind of view looking at the front side of the foot, right? So this green line is going to simulate our tibialis anterior. Remember, that muscle is working to decelerate the forefoot from coming down to the ground so it doesn't go kaboom or kaslap, right? Those of you who run and you hear that ka-clunk, ka-clunk, ka-clunk as you run, you're likely that slappy type runner, and you want to work on bringing the foot closer to your body, right? It's just really simple. If you want to decrease the amount of work that this muscle has to do, right, to stop you from slapping down on the ground, right, if you contact closer to you, I'm not talking so much about heel strike versus midfoot or forefoot. I just mean bring that foot contact closer to your body. You decrease the work that this muscle has to do each and every foot plant. It's just physics, okay? You move the contact point closer to your body, there's less stress on the tissues that have to support and stabilize that muscle. Now, that's called fixing the biomechanical problem, right? The second step is to increase the tissue capacity, or how much load this tissue can actually tolerate. We'll talk about that tomorrow. All right, now, so that's an anterior shin splint, okay? We also have people have pain in the inside of the shin, right? This is called the posterior medial tibial stress syndrome, right? Or you can call it an inner shin splint, right? So again, what you want to realize here is that this muscle has a very long insertion on the inside of the tibia, right? It goes inside the tibia, on the inside of the foot, around the behind the navicular, underneath the foot, and actually attaches over on the outside of the foot. It's a big sling muscle, right? And so the interesting thing about this is, right, as we walk and run, we have to be able to steer and stabilize the foot-ankle complex. So when those of you show up with a foot which is not very stable, right, what happens is, instead of just contacting and rolling through nice controlled, this posterior tibialis muscle gets put in a position of what? Strain, right? It's elongated every single time it comes down because your foot's collapsing, right, too far. Now, the interesting thing is with this, people think, oh, I want to strengthen the posterior tib, and you do to increase the tissue tolerance. But I'm going to let you know a little secret here. Remember, your posterior tibialis controls rear foot on forefoot position. If you showed up with a more resilient and more robust forefoot control, guess what would happen? Those muscles would stabilize your arch, and your posterior tib can go back to being a secondary helper and stabilizer of the rear foot and not a prime mover. So remember I talked about fixing the problem? The vast majority of people out there with shin splints have problems in the inside of the shin, right? And so that all goes back to what? Improving the support and stability within your arch itself, right? So the foot doesn't collapse as far. If your foot's stronger, guess what happens? You pass less stresses up to your shin. Ta-da! That's how you beat your inside of your shin splints, or your posterior medial tibial stress syndrome. So to sum this all up, right? We've got sort of two things, right? Your job as an athlete is to take responsibility to fix your body, right? So we have to fix the biomechanics, right? We talked about for people with the anterior shin splints, right? You need to contact closer to your body to decrease load in that tissue. And tomorrow I'll show you some exercises to actually work on increasing the tissue capacity, right? Which is number 2, to improve tissue tolerance. If you are having pain in the inside of your shin, right? That's a sign that, hey, I'm showing up to my sport with deficient forefoot stability, right? Because my forefoot isn't working, my rear foot's moving too much, which puts that posterior tib in a longer position. And muscles don't like to be in a longer position. It's called increased strain. And that's when they go kaput, and that's why our little friend over here has pain in the inside of his shin. And we want Green Eyes to be able to run. Thanks. We'll hit more tomorrow. Bye-bye.